I do want to make it known, please ignore things that my hair does. I tried. And ignore my makeup. I was trying to copy a really pretty girl on Pinterest and I obviously failed. So we're going to ignore the smudges in my eyes because I don't have time to redo it. Hello, what's up? Welcome back to my channel. Thank you so much for stopping by. If you're new, my name is Bree, also known as the Sunlit Witch, here on YouTube and over on Instagram. So happy to see you here. I know I took a little bit of a break after my whopping 2 videos. I'm an Aries, what can we do? But I'm so glad to see you again. It's really nice to be back. Today, I wanted to kind of put my 2 cents into the whole tarot for beginners space. I was really hesitant to make this video because that specific topic has already been so oversaturated, but a lot of the tips that are, I think, the most popular don't resonate with me and I don't find them helpful, which isn't to say that they aren't good tips. It's just speaking on the fact that we're all different and we all have different learning styles. If I think these tips would not have been helpful for me as a beginner, there are probably other people who agree and other people who find those tips really unhelpful and are still struggling. I figured I would just pop in and share the tips that I think are actually very helpful for people who have like my specific learning style. This is so specific to the individual. As with everything in the spiritual world, just like, you know, give it a shot, try it. Take what works and leave what doesn't. Everybody's different. If none of these tips work for you, they just don't work for you, that's fine. If they all work for you, great. If only some of them work for you, great. These are pretty unorthodox tips and it's more so stuff to just kind of keep in mind that I think would be beneficial to a beginner trying to learn, so that, you know, you don't like get frustrated and think that you're doing something wrong when you're just learning. Let's go ahead and jump in, and here are my 5 top tarot tips for beginners. Number 1 is to not take things so seriously. I know that that's gonna not be necessarily a popular opinion, but I think it's especially valid when you're starting out. When you're first starting to read tarot, chances are you are going to have a lot of work to do with that connection with your cards, with whatever like energy you're using to pull the cards. You're also probably not gonna be familiar with all 78 cards. So I think it's really important that you take all of your readings as a beginner. I would take every reading you do with a massive grain of salt. Like, not only are your readings possibly going to be a little bit more inaccurate than they will be in the future when you're more attuned to that skill, but I think it's really important to keep in mind that when you're not necessarily familiar with the cards, you can kind of jump to an extreme really easily. Because I mean, honestly, most of the content I see surrounding tarot, the most easily consumable content surrounding tarot, are more so like extreme versions of that card in meme form, which can be funny for people who know tarot, but can also be kind of scary if you're not really familiar with those archetypes and that energy, and if you don't know when people are joking and when they're being serious. Also, not every tarot reading is going to be really serious and really intense. Sometimes your tarot cards are just gonna give you a thumbs up and tell you that you're doing great. Other times, your tarot cards can tell you to fuck off. Not every reading you do is going to give you some profound epiphany or is going to like change the course of your life. Quite frankly, you shouldn't be experiencing really big shifts in your life that frequently, or at least as frequently as I think beginners will be pulling cards. All of that being said, don't take your cards so seriously. Start with like the bare minimum of what that card might mean and then go from there. Just because I don't like people getting scared of tarot, I don't like people kind of self-sabotaging, I don't like people using tarot as a means to encourage self-fulfilling prophecies. So just take it easy, let that part of your journey learning tarot just be fun and be exciting, and don't take it too seriously, because you could end up seeing and reading too much into something that would normally be pretty harmless. I know that that's not going to be a particularly popular opinion, but it's one that I think is really important for beginners, especially with the way that tarot is discussed so openly in online spaces, where that boundary of what's serious and what's a joke is so not clear to beginners. So yeah, that's the first tip. Don't take things too seriously. Chill out, have fun. Don't assume everything is a big deal. Second tip, also going to be really unpopular, but I think I've said this before in my Instagram, and I will continue. I'll die on this hill. My second tip is don't pull a card a day. Again, I know that that's really unpopular. As a disclaimer, if you think pulling one card a day is really helpful for you, then keep doing it. Don't listen to me. Like, I'm not telling you to stop if you are doing it and you find it helpful. It's more so if it's not working for you, stop doing it. Pulling a card a day didn't do anything for me, because for me personally, it felt like I was prioritizing memorization and like just learning keywords over critically understanding the card as a part of a whole. And this to me was just very unhelpful. Memorizing doesn't help my brain apply information, because that's kind of how I view it. I think of memorizing as like just the collection and storage of knowledge, whereas critical thinking is like being able to apply the knowledge you have. If I don't understand it, I'm not going to remember it, but if I understand it, then I'll remember it. And so there's really no point in memorizing something that just makes sense to you. Does that make sense? I know there has to be somebody out there who feels the same way I do. I felt this way my whole life. This specifically is a tip I wanted to address, because I think pulling a card a day is probably the most popular and widespread common tarot tip for beginners, and that everyone says. That probably work for some people, but I think it's also just like everybody says that. And the alternative, I think, is to learn tarot into chunks, if that makes sense. Like learning how tarot functions as a whole 78 cards, as separate journeys, as different themes, thematic elements, as different correspondences, as kind of parts of a whole, as opposed to like 78 individual cards. That to me makes a lot more sense than just learning each card individually. For example, this is a very loose example. If you were to say for one whole week, right, not even a day, but for one whole week, you spent all your time studying the Suit of Wands. And I'm not saying you can learn everything there is to know about the Suit of Wands in a week, but as a beginner, if you were to just spend a whole week dedicating your time, like 10 minutes a day, 20 minutes a day, just spending time with the Suit of Wands. And I mean like spread the whole Suit of Wands out, look at all of the cards, read about the Suit of Wands, look at how that journey from 1 to 10 progresses, look at the court cards from the Suit of Wands, look at color, look at shapes, look at different imagery. And then the next week you would spend the whole week learning the Suit of Cups, right? And then the Suit of Pentacles, and then the Suit of Swords. If you were drawing a card a day, you would only be able to go through 30 to 31 cards. Doing it this way, you're able to get through the entire minor arcana. Not saying you're gonna know everything there is to know about the minor arcana in a month, but by looking at each of the suits individually and then compounding that knowledge of each suit on top of the other, you're looking at the cards as they work together, and you're able to use like more critical thinking, I think, in order to make sense of those suits, not just like as different cards, but like you have knowledge you can now apply to each of the cards that encompasses the whole of tarot instead of just like one by one. I don't know if that made any sense at all, but I'm so tired of hearing people tell beginners to draw a card a day when I'm like, does that really work for people? Of all the tarot tips I give, That's the one I'm the most curious about. Tell me down below if like you pulling a card a day actually helped you learn tarot. Or let me know if you're like me and you're like, yes, thank you. Like, I hate that tip. For me personally, if it works for you, it works for you. I don't want to offend anybody with my hot, spicy tarot takes. Everybody's different. Tip number 3 is to use books with more than just keywords. This kind of rolls into the last tip. It is also kind of expanding on how to learn tarot in chunks. And that is to just like find the right resource. I think one of the beautiful things about where we're at in society right now and the fact that there's so much accessible online content, like that is so fantastic. I think it just makes tarot as a whole so much more accessible. It makes it a lot easier for anybody to pick it up and learn it. And I think that that is fantastic, and I want us to keep moving in that direction. However, not every tarot infographic you see online is going to be helpful. I'm really sorry, but the caveat to having so much wonderful, accessible online information is that literally anybody can post that information. Something to keep in mind is that online content is often created with the intention to be as easily consumable, easily likable, easy to engage, easy to digest. And unfortunately, the process of learning a new skill isn't always really easy. In my experience, what I have seen is that a lot of this online tarot tip content kind of ends up becoming really repetitive. The amount of like usefulness they end up really like fulfilling has a very distinct shelf life, because they kind of all say the same thing, and eventually you're going to want a resource that's going to allow you to dive a little deeper and allow you to challenge yourself a little bit more. My recommendation is to find like a comprehensive book that really works for you and is going to like keep you busy for a really long time. I suggest finding a book with exercises, with questions, things that you can like engage with and respond to. You're not just absorbing the same fun facts like every other day. You're actually like pushing yourself to comprehensively learn tarot. I feel like this tip comes off as kind of pretentious, and I know not everybody can afford to invest in a resource that's not free. Do what you are able to do and do what you can afford, and you know, don't do anything that you're not comfortable with. Again, I'm just coming from my own point of view and what I have noticed and what I have become frustrated with. And if you are serious about learning tarot, then you know, I highly recommend using a book that will push you to do that. I did want to recommend my favorite book on tarot. Let me go get it. This is my favorite book about tarot. It's called Tarot Correspondences by T. Susan Chang. I think that this is the most helpful thing I've ever picked up and read. This one is essentially a whole ass textbook. It's very comprehensive, it's very large. This again is running into the lines of, we're not just learning keywords here, right? Like Chang encourages you to come up with your own keywords by explaining the different themes that stretch across different parts of tarot as a whole. It's so much more helpful in actually being able to retain and apply information. The beginning of the book is like a bunch of charts with correspondences and associations. I mean, the book is exactly what it says it is. It really does go through a lot. She has like loads of exercises and questions and challenges for you throughout the book. If you're a beginner and you're looking for a book that's really going to be your guide for like a whole ass year, I highly recommend putting it in this book. I highly recommend this book. That is my third tip. My third tip is basically buy this book. somebody has more recommendations down below, please let me know, so that, like, you know, if this book is kind of scary, we have more recommendations in the comments. This next tip is probably going to be the spiciest of takes. It's probably going to be the least well received, and I understand why. I've actually had conversations about this tip with friends of mine in person, and it's gotten kind of a really surprising reaction, so I know this isn't going to resonate with everybody. My fourth tip is don't rely too much on your intuition. I want to be clear that this is not some spicy take in response to the push on intuitive tarot reading. I also consider myself to be an intuitive tarot reader. I think intuition is a really powerful tool that we should all be working on, even people who don't identify as practitioners or witches or whatever. I just think maybe if you only rely on your intuition, you're not always going to be accurate. And I say this because intuition is a skill, right? Intuition is something you have to work on. Intuition is, it's not just like oh, either you have it or you don't. Even if you feel like you're really naturally intuitive, myself included, I have a Pisces stellium and my chart ruler is in Scorpio. I consider myself to be very intuitive, but I would never base a reading entirely off of my intuition. And I say this because your intuition can be very biased. When you are doing a reading, you know, there are a lot of different factors you want to consider. You know, there's not just the cards, there's also whatever like energetic force you're using to pull the cards. You also have to consider what mindset you're in, what you're going through, how you personally would interpret those cards versus like maybe how those cards actually apply to somebody else in very different like life position than you. And I think this is, again, kind of a part of the problem with online content, is that we push the word intuition so much as a part of freeing ourselves from like traditional learning methods and conventionalism, that we hear intuition and we think that that's like a catch-all phrase for like, we just see the message we want. And I think that sometimes it can encourage beginners to interpret a message that's not there because it's the message they want. Your intuition we describe as an inner voice, right? And that's great. There are more inner voices than just our intuition. And when you're beginning, it's really hard for you to discern what that inner voice actually is. And so your inner voice can be so many things. Your inner voice can be trauma. Your inner voice can be a shadow. It can be anxiety. It can be comfort. It can be like a comfort blanket. It can be a victim mentality. It can be scarcity mentality. It can just be a fear. My point is, intuition's very important. Intuition's very powerful. Just keep in mind that like it's a skill you need to be building as you learn. It's not something that you should just be like falling back on the second you start reading tarot. I mean, I can tell you a load of times I thought I was following my intuition, and then in hindsight, when I evaluated the situation from a more honest place, I realized that that gut feeling I was getting was, well, this is the safe answer, so it feels right, and so that must be my intuition telling me to go with that one, when it wasn't. And it takes a lot of, you know, I don't think there's ever going to be an age where someone's intuition is just going to be magically making their decisions for them. I know that people, creators, experts, influencers in this field are always going to want to make intuition seem a lot more magical and a lot more all-encompassing and protective than it is actually going to be. So just as a beginner, don't get too caught up in the hype of intuitive reading and think that your intuition is going to replace to me, very significant knowledge. I know that In this age, we don't like conventional learning, and we don't like conventional like meanings of things. I know I hear a lot of people these days say, ignore the traditional meaning of the card, and a part of me is kind of like, no, don't ignore it, just maybe like use that foundational information as a basis for exploring other things. I just personally don't feel like intuition is going to be a replacement for a like comprehensive like understanding of the cards, the history of tarot. And I feel really passionately about this because I know some intuitive readers who would brag about like not knowing anything about the traditional tarot but are charging like $80 a reading, and I'm just like, I just can't get behind that. That's just a personal opinion. I'm just kind of very much a one is not more important than the other kind of person. That's the hottest take I have about tarot, is that intuition's very important, but don't rely on it too much when you're beginning, because what you think is your intuition might not be your intuition. And it's nothing to be ashamed of. Everybody has to learn that skill. It's just the way of it. Anyways, moving on to hopefully what is probably also a spicy take. I'm really trying not to. I feel like I'm immediately assuming people are gonna have a problem with this video. I'm not trying to upset anybody or like come for anybody or create some weird divisive hot take in the tarot community. But my fifth tip is also kind of weird. The fifth tip is to not read too frequently. Yeah. It kind of runs in line with the first tip, which was don't take things too seriously, because sometimes things aren't serious. It's kind of like that. Reading too frequently can be confusing. I think it can kind of be helpful when you're pulling the same 5 cards every day. If you're pulling the same 5 cards every day, then like clearly you're very attuned and you're very good at pulling, and your spirits are very happy to continue feeding that same message every single day to you. But some of us have guides that aren't very nice. My guides can be pretty tough on me, and I do know occasionally that if I ask too much about a topic without actually doing anything with the information that's been given to me, they can get kind of exasperated and start giving me attitude and start handing me cards that mean no sense. And it's kind of, it's ironic that I say this, but it's kind of an intuitive thing when you pull a card and you're like, this card is absolute bullshit. This isn't for me. For example, I got a new deck a while back and I was super excited to use it, and I whipped it out and I cleansed it. I like sat down and like did a reading with it almost immediately because I was so excited. And as soon as I looked at all the cards, I was like, this is absolute gibberish. Like this like my guides are taking a nap right now. The cards are not happy I did a reading without anything to ask. They just had nothing to say to me. They were like, what do you want? So just kind of keep that in mind, that like we have this sense of entitlement to things, and everything we're doing, we're like constantly like working with other energetic forces. And if they're giving you advice about a topic, especially an important one, like if you're pulling major arcana out the ass and you're sitting with that message, but then you don't do anything with it and keep asking the same fucking question over and over and over again, I'd get pissed at you too. We all have that friend who comes to you complaining about their problems and you give them advice and then they don't do shit about it. We all hate that friend. I mean, we don't hate them, we love them, but you know who that friend is. You know who I'm talking about. We all have one. And the same thing goes with tarot, because like at the end of the day, you should be using the cards as like a way of navigating the real world, not just like a way of constantly bothering external forces. Especially if you're getting major arcana cards. Don't follow up that reading with another reading the very next day. Some readings are very trivial. They're the equivalent of a thumbs up or a shrug. That's just how it works. Some readings are like that. Other readings are like big giant red flags, or are like, you know, really important messages. And if you if you gloss over them because you're just constantly looking for more information instead of like sitting with and looking at the information that's being given to you, you're gonna piss something off. Like, I mean, I would get mad at you. I just personally believe you shouldn't be doing readings too often. Pay attention to, sit with, and meditate, and then act upon the readings that you've already done. And then when you feel like there has been a shift, or you have an actual new like question or thought to bring to the conversation, then do another reading. But don't just like do readings for shits and giggles, because I mean in my opinion, you're creating a really tense relationship with, like, you know, the energy that you're using to help give you those messages. Like, those messages are coming from somewhere. Pulling cards isn't going to help you solve a problem. You know, you have to take the message and take the information that's been given to you and then apply it to the real world. So that's that. That's my other tip. Don't do tarot readings too often. And don't do tarot readings willy-nilly for no reason. I know some people like to do, what does the universe have in store for me today? Or like, what does the universe want me to know, kind of things. I think that's fine if you do it every now and then, but I just like wouldn't be doing it every day, because if your life is changing that rapidly on a day-to-day basis, I mean, first of all, I can't relate, but maybe slow down a little bit. Maybe, I don't know anybody whose life changes that frequently, who like is going through major arcana. Like major arcana is like big shit. Like, I don't know anybody who's just like pumping through those lessons day by day. And if you think you are, maybe think again, because I don't think you're swallowing that lesson the way you think you are. Or it's just going straight through you, if we want to continue that little metaphor. You need to digest it properly. Anyway, those are my 5 spicy tarot tips. I didn't mean for them to be spicy, but it's like, as I'm saying them, I'm thinking about people who I feel like would just take them personally and get angry about them. These tips are not like to make anybody upset or angry or make anybody feel like they're doing tarot wrong as a beginner. It's just to maybe address some of the hiccups you've had, because like I just don't see these tips talked about enough. I don't know, tarot is one of those things that has kind of become like you can't do it a wrong way, and I just very firmly disagree. You can do things the wrong way. You can do anything a wrong way. It's just the wrong isn't such like a very black and white obvious thing. It's just like sometimes if you're stuck and you're like stagnating in your learning, you need to adjust. It's not necessarily that like you were wrong in a bad way. It's just sometimes you need to learn to do things a different way. If I seem like I'm being an asshole, it's the combination of Aries, Sag, and Virgo energy and my big 3. Me apologizing for it a million times is definitely the Pisces coming through. So just, you know, take what works, take what doesn't. If a lot of this did not work with you, please don't take it personally. It's not about you in any regard. It's just about patterns I've seen and some maybe potential issues I've seen in people's learning and people getting stuck with things. And if you're not stuck and you don't need any of these tips, I don't know why you're watching this video, but then don't use these tips. Then it wasn't for you. I really hope if these tips help one person out there who's learning tarot and is like me and has been stuck with tips that don't make sense to them, if it helps that one person, I will be happy I made this video. Anyway, that's it. Feel free to like this video if you liked it, or dislike it and tell me how much you hated my tip and took it personally. Feel free to leave a comment down below about which tip you like the best, or tell me which tip pissed you off the most. And what else am I supposed to tell you to do? Oh, subscribe. Subscribe if you want more of this like wishy-washy, passive-aggressive asshole content in the future. I don't really have a set, I'm not gonna promise. I know I've promised set schedules in the past. I'm not gonna do that anymore, but I do have more content coming. So I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope it's helpful to you. I hope everybody learns to love and use tarot in the way that is best for them. And yeah, I still don't know how to end my videos, so